Right, guys, let's start this one from political news because they're also kind of important. White House eyes Budapest for peace talks with Zelensky and Putin. So Hungary, Orban. Well, yesterday and today, the informational field is just overwhelmed with the news about the possible meeting between Zelensky, Putin, and maybe Donald Trump. Associated Press, in a reference to some of the White House officials, said that during the call between Donald Trump and Putin at this meeting in the Oval Office, Putin proposed a meeting in Moscow and Donald Trump refused. Zelensky refused as well. And it is understandable because Moscow is not the neutral territory. As well as I would say Budapest. Is it Budapest Memorandum 2.0 that they expect to be signed in this meeting? Well, we understand that now Hungarian regime, yes, I may call it even like that, supports Putin's policy. That's why I don't think that Zelensky should go to Budapest. No, if there is the meeting, it should be somewhere in neutral country. Like Switzerland, I think is okay for that. And yesterday there were also some of the talks about the place, Geneva. Swiss authorities even mentioned that they could provide some of that temporary immunity to Vladimir Putin if he decides to attend this possible summit. So the rumors are going about Moscow, Budapest, Geneva. Moscow is not the variant any longer, it is understandable. Maybe something else we'll see, but for now I'm not sure if this meeting is really possible. Judging on what we know about Putin, I don't think that he is really interested in meeting between him and Zelensky, because he already said many times that Zelensky is not a legitimate leader of Ukraine. He is expired, they say. So how can he potentially meet with expired president, who, as Putin said before, has not legitimate right to even sign some of the peace agreement? It contradicts all of this Russian propaganda. Plus, for Putin, Zelensky is just one more leader of Ukrainian Oblast of Russia, because Putin thinks that Ukraine is part of Russia. He's imperialist and wants to restore the Russian Empire or Soviet Union, whatever. But of course, there is the chance for this meeting because we live in unpredicted world, but I would say that the chance for it is very low. It doesn't mean that it will not happen at all, but yeah, I would be really surprised if it happens. Well, guys, I think that after all, it could be the plan of those gentlemen to organize the common pressure on Ukraine. That's why they chose Budapest. We understand kind of the close ties between Trump, Orban, and Putin. Even during the election campaign, there were the special meetings between Orban and Trump, where Orban was really positive about the future pressure on Zelensky, and indeed Trump pressed Zelensky. Remember the first Oval Office meeting. So the only way I see the participation of Vladimir Putin in this meeting is to press Zelensky even more and force Ukraine to give up its territories. Also, media mentioned that Trump called to Viktor Orban after meeting with EU leaders, and he called over Ukrainian EU membership. For now, Hungary is the main and only country which is openly opposing Ukrainian EU membership. It is the biggest obstacle for Ukraine, and Zelensky mentioned before that we may look to the European Union membership as the part of the security guarantees for Ukraine, and it seems like Donald Trump is totally okay with that. For him, Europe is Europe, European Union is their business, so why not to press Orban a little for him to slow down with his rhetoric? Well, according to media, Orban refused. He said that he will continue to block EU membership for Ukraine. The European Union also has its own common security and defense policy. It's not the fifth article or something like that, but kind of close. You might drag if you really want to support Ukraine with that. So it could be just a part of something which could be added to the general security guarantees of Ukraine, together with military supplies, like deploying the army forces, because European leaders continue to speak about this possible feature which they may do in Ukraine if the war is freezed, or if the war is over, they might deploy their forces. So yeah, in a way, the European Union membership for Ukraine plays a good role at the current stage. In general, like European Union has its own flaws, I think lots of the flaws, but now I think it's profitable. Okay, more news. Europe to impose fresh sanctions on Russia if Putin refuses trilateral meeting. So between Trump, Zelensky and Putin. If Putin refuses, new sanctions. But I think those sanctions would be applied in any sort of the case. Once in a while, Europe introduces new sanctions packages on Russia. This year, for example, there were at least two packages, 17 and 18. Unlike Donald Trump, European Union is not TACO, but there are some of the EU members like Slovakia and Hungary. They drag this process. According to the White House, they are already preparing for this possible meeting. Well, even if it happens, my friends, it would not change anything, as for me, because we see how Russia intensifies its military action in Ukraine, how they produce more weaponry, they drag more army personnel into the army. So except those talks and meetings, I don't see any sort of the signs for the war to come to an end. Or at least some sort of the ceasefire. For me it would be like a miracle. Meanwhile, Mr. Besson, Treasury Secretary of the United States, that's the equivalent position of the financial minister, mentioned that the USA is selling weapons to European allies with 10% mark up, so higher price than usual, before they're transferred to Ukraine. Oh my god, those are interesting allies we have, right? Well, here he says that maybe those 10% will cover the cost of air cover, so transportation of the goods. Maybe, kind of the interesting word he uses here. Maybe yes, maybe no. So our allies and Ukraine itself are purchasing weapons for the higher price than the market, 10% at least. Is there any separate bill for transportation? Why 10%? Why, like how? Guys, I don't understand it. It seems like they're making profit from this conflict, really. At least it sounds like that, because logistics, you can calculate logistics, all right? The hours for personnel, kerosene, overhaul maintenance of those cargo airplanes. And by the way, Ukraine is using its own airline, Antonov, to carry a lot of the military cargo from USA to Europe. So 10% for what? I don't understand it, because really, Ruslan Antonov 124 airplanes are flying all the time carrying that stuff. And 747s, for example, from Atlas Air, which are also used to deliver military cargo to Europe, they belong to the private company. So this company has the contract with Pentagon. They're numbers, they're literally numbers. So please send this actual bill for logistics. I don't freaking understand why 10%. Because for me, it's not understandable why they increase the price for military production. Military production is military production, goods. And logistics, you can define the actual price. I don't understand it. Maybe I'm stupid, I don't know lots of the stuff, but it sounds creepy. And where the hell is mineral deal which was signed and should have covered some of the expenses? And about the European funds, some of them are given to Ukraine like a loan, so Ukraine after all will have to pay most of the funds. That's why, guys, the situation is kind of interesting. Donald Trump mentioned recently that his motivation to stop the war in Ukraine is to go to heaven, because in this case he would stop lots of the killings, and for sure it's his golden ticket for the heaven gates, but Epstein Island could stay on the way, on the road to heaven. And there was the conference where the Speaker of the White House confirms the real intent of Donny to go to heaven. Let's listen to this part.
It said on Fox News this morning that he's partially seeking peace in order to get to heaven. Was he joking, or is there spiritual motivation behind his peace deals here?
I think the president was serious. I think the president wants to get to heaven, as I hope we all do in this room as well.
What can I say? I wish him to achieve his goal as fast as possible. Stopping the war in Ukraine, what did you think? It seems like Donald Trump is really serious about it, because he cancelled his golf holidays. Freaking golf holidays, Donny! That's the biggest sacrifice, so he is really working hard. About guarantees, Rubio to lead Ukraine security guarantees talks with Trump promising air support. I think that Rubio is the one who really works hard. It's not sarcasm here, no. He's not like total degenerate, and he understands that Ukraine will not agree on territorial concessions to Russia. At least he said it in his most recent interview. Well, one more position for you, Rubio, to take care about security guarantees. There was also info that Putin wants to meet Zelensky personally without Trump. So lots of the information coming, and it contradicts each other in many of the cases. So I would wait to define what is really happening. Maybe we should wait even for many days, like 1 week or something. Or 2 weeks, yeah, usual thing. But again, guys, I don't think that the deal with Russia is really possible, and President Macron yesterday said about it. He mentioned that Putin is a predator. Predator, he wants blood, he wants war, and physical signs, as I say to you, about the war to end are absent. And you know what? The day before yesterday, Russia again launched a massive attack on Ukraine using cruise missiles. They launched those from strategic aviation. They use also ballistics and hypersonic missiles, plus drones. They hit mostly Poltava region. There are some of the oil refineries and oil storages of Ukraine, so it also may harm Ukrainian logistics and army supplies. This night also strikes continue, for example, in Sumy, private households and some of the storages were hit. And this is the moment of the strike on Kremenchuk oil facility, filmed the previous night. Yeah, the facility I think is gone. It's the Russian cruise missile which hit it. Well, despite all of those strikes, Russia is using less of the strategic aviation after this spiderweb operation, which shows that it was successful and Ukraine still has cards. Alright, Ukraine hit the Druzhba pipeline. The pipeline is used to deliver oil to Hungary and Slovakia, so pipeline attack stops Russian oil flow to Hungary. It was reported yesterday and the attack happened the day before yesterday. However, now according to the recent information, supplies were restored. We have the information about it from Peter Sziarlo. He's like Hungarian Lavrov, foreign minister. Oil deliveries to Hungary via Druzhba pipeline have been restored after the Ukrainian attack 2 days ago. I think Russian side for the swift repairs. We expect Ukraine not to strike this vital pipeline again. This is not our war. Hungary must be left out of it. Of course, as well as Azerbaijan. It is not Azerbaijani war, but Russia attacks Azerbaijani gas infrastructure on Ukrainian territory. By the way, very close to NATO border. Just 3 days ago, Russia attacked Azerbaijani gas hub in Ukraine once again. And Ukraine here just responds, it's not Hungarian war. Nothing in Hungary was attacked. It's just the Russian infrastructure. Whether you like it, Hungary, or not, speak with the Russian side about security of your energy. But you see how this war expands, touching the interests of the countries which are far away from Ukraine, like Azerbaijan, for example. It's in Caucasus. But nevertheless, because economies are interconnected, it might harm lots of the players or individual countries, I would say. So Ukrainian war has the potential to expand for other countries. I think like that, and I'm gonna film the dedicated video about it and why I think that this year's military exercise or military drills in Belarus are very concerning. Stand by for that video. I'm gonna publish it maybe today, maybe tomorrow, we'll see.
I mean, if you were Russia, who would want to have your enemy, your opponent, sitting on your line? You don't do that. So it was always thought that Ukraine was sort of a buffer between Russia and the rest of Europe. And it was a big, wide buffer. Everything worked out well until Biden got involved. When Biden gave them $100 billion right up front, I don't give them anything. I don't know if you know it, but since I've been there, we don't pay. First of all, I made a deal to take rare earth. That's the equivalent of much more than the $350 billion that Biden got away, because I felt so foolish. It was so stupid what he did. And I was able to make a deal with Ukraine, and they were very nice. They have great rare earth, among the best in the world. And we took much more than the $350 billion, and they were great about it. So we got that, handled. But now,
so idea for Trump is for Ukraine to be some sort of the buffer country, not to join Europe. No, it should be under some sort of the Russian influence. A little pro-Russian, just not to have NATO at the border, but Russia actually has NATO countries bordering it and everything is okay. This idea we also usually heard from Orban, that Ukraine should be a buffer between East and West. But you know what is wrong with all of their philosophy is that Ukrainian people chose not to be a buffer any longer. They chose it in 2014. There was Maidan revolution where our people stated that they want to join democratic world. Now someone wants to exit this world like Donald Trump personally. But Ukrainian intentions is to be the part of the democratic family, maybe the part of the European Union, and not be under Russian influence any longer. And indeed, yeah, Russia doesn't like it and they want to expand their empire. They think that Ukraine belongs to them and they've started this war. And Trump, again, he spreads his delusional narratives about $350 billion which were spent for Ukraine from the United States. Complete nonsense. And there is no change in his stupid brain since he started to speak about it. So nothing good, absolutely, I expect under the current White House administration, and luckily European allies, they continue to support Ukraine. Alright, Germany, Deutschland wants to reform its army, investing billions of euros, like 350, that's a lot. They want to do it till 2041, and it will allow Germany to build the most massive and capable army from all of the European countries. Interesting. And you know what? This time I support this idea. History changes after all, but Russian propaganda already mentioned that they are preparing the Fourth Reich to attack Russia. They will invest a lot into every sort of the Bundeswehr, including aircraft, missiles. Well, that's the huge program. And actually, it is Russia, with its aggressive actions, is pushing allies to reform their armies. Guess about the frontlines updates, I'm still waiting for more information to come, but the situation for Russia is not so good in this direction, especially not far away from Zoloty Kolodez. But still, for more details, I'm gonna update you in a few hours. And thank you guys for your kind support on Patreon. The link for my Patreon page is in the video description just below. Thank you for motivating me to film more and more of the content for you. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.